10 days away from American Thanksgiving, and Boston is in first place in Atlantic. Plus, we're going to talk about how important is home ice in the playoffs, and do coaches really dislike players, and does it matter? All coming up on Inside the Coach's Room. Welcome back inside the Coach's Room. I'm Steve Peters. You can just call me Petey, a former video coach of the Arizona Coyotes for over 20 years. So I've been around this league and inside the coaches' rooms with a lot of coaches. And so I'm trying to give a little bit different perspective of what it's like inside the coach's room during these shows. And I tell you what, we're getting 10 days away from American Thanksgiving. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Do teams in the locker rooms are talking about Thanksgiving? Yes. It matters where you are in the standings at American Thanksgiving. Why? Well, because you're a quarter of the way into the season. It's really starting to define where teams are and what their identity is and who they are as a team by this time in the season. So when you look through the standings now, there are some surprises. Yeah. In the Atlantic Division, the top three teams are Boston, Detroit, and Montreal with 10 days to go in before American Thanksgiving. And you know who's not in the top positions in the Atlantic? Toronto, Florida, and Tampa. It's a complete upheaval in the Atlantic Division. And I tell you what, when you go and you start looking at the statistics in the Atlantic Division, the top three teams a year ago, right now, 19, 17, 18 games in on this date a year ago, Florida was in first place, Toronto in second, and Tampa in third, all within 4 points. Boston just outside the top three. Those teams are nowhere to be found right now. And I tell you what, it is surprising to see how much this has changed from last year. You look at the bottom of the standings a year ago right now, the Montreal Canadiens were in last place in the Atlantic Division this far into the season a season ago. So maybe the Buffalo Sabres have... No, they don't. Sorry, Buffalo Sabres fans, you don't. You're not coming from last 16 points. That's where Montreal had 16 points after 19 games. And then they go on a little bit of a run and make the playoffs. It's not happening for Buffalo last year. But is it going to happen for Toronto? Is it going to happen for Florida? Is it going to happen in Tampa? 5th, 6th, and 7th in the Atlantic Division right now. Well, the good news for those teams, this division is a little bit tighter than it was a year ago. And these are teams that you think are going to start climbing in the standings. But what about the Boston Bruins? And are we surprised that they are doing what they are doing? When you look at their record this year, through 20 games, they're 12-8. Last year they were 8-9-3. They have 24 points this year, was pushed up first in the Atlantic. Last year they had 19. They were fourth in the Atlantic. But why? Well, they're scoring goals. And we talked about this when we talked about Anaheim a week ago and how much a difference a new coach can make in an atmosphere, specifically offensively, on the offensive side of the puck. Hey, structure and system is going to make a difference defensively in how a team defends and how they play in their defensive zone. And you're going to see that metric in the goals against allowed and how a team plays. I think that's more of what the team does systematically. Offensively, yeah, there are some system things in play when you talk about offense. But it's more about line matchups and who you get out on the ice at the right time. And honestly, the mood in the locker room. And do you feel like you have the freedom to play offensively? And we showed it with Anaheim last week when we were talking about the shift to Joel Quenneville and how this team is starting to enjoy going to the rink and how happy they are going to the rink and what that does to a player like Leo Carlsson. And you've seen what it does to his statistics to feel free offensively and to feel like you're not going to get in trouble every time you go out on the ice. And you get that feeling of positivity and happiness. And when you play like that as an offensive player, you have more success. And that's what's going on in Boston. Their goals for per game this season, they're scoring over 3 goals. They're 3.35 goals per game this year, which puts them 5th in the National Hockey League right now. 5th in goals for per game. Last year, through 20 games, they had 2.4 goals per game. That's almost a goal less per game, and they were 31st. This team couldn't score. It was miserable. And you started to talk about how this team was sliding. And you could see it in their stars. And most notably, you could see it in David Pastrnak. And you look at what he's done offensively and look at the power play last season. Last season, their power play was 11.7% through 20 games. They were last in the National Hockey League. 32nd ranked power play last year through 20 games. This year, 25.4%, and they're 6th. And why? Well, it's how well this start has happened for David Pastrnak. Pasternak right now, last season in through 20 games, he had 8 goals, 9 assists for 17 points. This year, he's got 11 goals, 15 assists for 26 points. But where you're looking, where it really makes a difference is on the power play. Last season, he had 4 power play points through 20 games. This year, he's got 12. 3 times as many points on the power play. He's getting 1.3 points per game this season versus 0.85 points per game a year ago. David Pasternak has found his offensive stride again, and that's what's helped pull this Boston Bruin team out of the cellar and back into a potential playoff spot with 10 days to go before American Thanksgiving. Now, does the coach make a difference? He does. I'm telling you, the shift in coaches make a difference. It made a difference in Anaheim when we talked about them last week. Marco Sturm has brought a different attitude and a different way of playing in Boston. Yes, there are some defensive structural things where they're trying to limit some chances against and trying to do some things defensively, but more about the freedom to play offensively. And you are seeing that with this team and their ability to put numbers on the board. But there are some concerns in Boston. And the biggest concern in Boston is their injuries. And can they overcome these injuries? Lindholm on the IR. Casey Middlestad is out. Arvidsson is out. Charlie McAvoy is out. How long will that McAvoy injury be? That is going to be not just a big key for Boston, but we'll keep an eye on that as the Olympics start to approach. Injuries are a big deal. Can they play through these injuries, and can they overcome this little spell with all of these guys out of the lineup? Now, this Boston team is 1-8 of 9, and part of that is their offensive outburst. We talked about 3+ goals in 8 of those 9 games. 3 or more goals in 8 of 9. 3 is kind of the benchmark. They've got 3 or more in 8 of 9. That's a team that couldn't put up those kind of numbers a season ago. Big test coming up. They've got Carolina tonight at home on a Monday night. Then they pack up and hit the road, and they're going to play that California trip, the southwestern United States. They're going to Anaheim, LA, and San Jose. 3 games, 4 days, and I think that's going to be a benchmark to see how they are going to slot in come Thanksgiving time. That is going to be the big test. If they can come out of this getting points on this Western swing, they are going to be in a playoff spot come Thanksgiving. A huge turnaround for this Boston Bruin team from a year ago that was really struggling to be even talking about playoffs. Hey, I'll be honest. I didn't have this team in a playoff spot come Thanksgiving. I said this team is not going to make the playoffs again this year. And there are a lot of teams that are on that bubble at Thanksgiving in the East. The New York Rangers are on that bubble in the East. You go to the Western Conference, things are starting to shape up in the West. The Central Division last week was being led by the Utah Mammoth. This year starting to shift to the 3 teams that I had at the top of the Central Division in the Western Conference from the outset. It's Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg. And Colorado right now is a juggernaut. They're 8-0-2 right now in their last 10. They've won 6 straight. Dallas has won 5 straight. Even Winnipeg is playing 500 over the last 10. And those 3 teams are starting to propel themselves and separate themselves in that Central Division. Now the Pacific in the West is not playing the way I had anticipated. The LA Kings struggled out of the gate. They're 7-2-1 and have won 4 straight. They're leading the Pacific. The Anaheim Ducks are 7-3, although they've lost 3 straight. And it'll be interesting to see how this young team with a new coach can get out of this losing streak, and can they get back on track, as we just mentioned, with the Boston Bruins coming to town. Seattle Kraken are surprising teams. They have 2 regulation losses in their last 10, and they're in the top 3 in the Pacific. And the Chicago Blackhawks find themselves in a playoff spot with 10 days before Thanksgiving. Who are the surprises in the West that find themselves out of a playoff spot with 10 days to go? Well, the 2 wildcard teams from a year ago, Minnesota and St. Louis, are just on the outside. St. Louis is really struggling. This is a team that finds itself 3 wins in their last 10. They are going to have to find a way to get more consistency. They can't keep the puck out of the net. They are worse than the Western Conference in goal differential with a -22. It's a big problem in St. Louis. Can they correct that ship? It's a big hill to climb right now for St. Louis. Some other surprise teams in the West that are out of a playoff spot right now with a week to go before American Thanksgiving. The Edmonton Oilers, but they're coming. This is a team that's starting to turn it around. They're 5-1-2 at home right now. That is, they just haven't had enough home games to get them out of this little funk that they've been in. They're going to get more home games. We talked about them only playing 17 road games after January 1st. It's a big deal in Edmonton. And so look for the Edmonton Oilers to continue to climb. They are tied for that last playoff spot. They've played 2 more games than Vegas. That's why they're outside a playoff spot But that's one of the other teams that made the playoffs last year. Calgary was a team that was right on the edge of the wild card. They're finding themselves way out of it. 20 games and a quarter into the season, and they're 10 points out. It's tough to overcome those before Thanksgiving, and clearly after. That's a long road to climb. Utah, a team that was there a week ago, struggling a little bit. And we're going to talk about Utah later in the show, but I want to talk about how important this is for Utah. And excuse me, for Edmonton. And do these games matter? They do. And I think it's important. Do I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to be a playoff team? Yeah, I do. I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to be a playoff team. And I think that they're a team that is going to find themselves competing again. Can they compete for a Stanley Cup? Gosh, that is a long road. But these points right now are important. Why? Because it helps set up those home ice matchups in the playoffs. And sometimes you don't think about those games in October, November. And I'm telling you, in the coaches' room, sometimes you don't think about it. It's only the first 10 games, and we're finding our stride and we're finding our way. But these are the games that separate these teams later in the season. These are the points that are incredibly difficult to get. And how important is this home ice? Well, when a playoff team starts, well, let's start with the President's Trophy. And we've talked about a President's Trophy curse and their ability to win with winning the President's Trophy and going on to win a Stanley Cup. And honestly, it doesn't happen very often. And that's recently, because it used to happen all the time. When you go back to the last team that won the President's Trophy and won the Stanley Cup, it was the 2013 Chicago Blackhawks. The 2013 Chicago Blackhawks are the last team to win the President's Trophy and go all the way through and win the Stanley Cup. Now, when you go prior to that, it was a lot more common. 2008 Wings, 2002 Wings, 2001 Avs, 1999 Stars, 94 Rangers, 89 Flames, 87 Oilers. So when you look at that time from 87 to 2000 and that 13 years, it happened much more often than it has in the last 26 years. So the President's Trophy might not matter as much, but does home ice? Well, let's look at what happened on home ice since the last team that has won the President's Trophy, the 2013 Chicago Blackhawks. Well, how important is that home ice? And we've seen it with the President's Trophy. So it hasn't been as important since 2013. No team has won the President's Trophy and then gone on to win the Stanley Cup since 2013. But is home ice important? So we got to look at teams that have had home ice through the playoffs that have gone on to win the Stanley Cup. And since 2013, when the Chicago Blackhawks went on as President's Trophy and Stanley Cup winners, it's only happened twice. It happened to the 2023 Vegas Golden Knights, where they had the home ice to start all four of their playoff series before winning the Stanley Cup in 23. And the 2022 Colorado Avalanche, same with them. They had wire-to-wire home ice advantage. They had all four series where they had home ice, and then they go on to win the Stanley Cup. So if you look at it that way, it's two of the last four Stanley Cup winners have had home ice advantage throughout the entire playoffs. So is it important? The answer is yes. It is. In Florida in 24, they were home in 3 of the 4 series, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. So if you put that team into account, it really does make a difference getting home ice. And so these games right now that we talk about, well, the New York Rangers are coming back into it. The Edmonton Oilers are coming back into it. Florida can lose a few. Tampa's losing a few. Toronto's losing a few. Is it going to matter? Well, considering 3 of the last 4 Stanley Cup Stanley Cup winners had home ice through the entirety of the playoffs, recency bias would tell you, yeah, it matters. So these teams need to start digging themselves out quickly if they're going to want to have home ice. Now, is it the end-all, be-all? Do you need to win home ice advantage to win a Stanley Cup? Well, no. Because you can go back through, since the year 2000, there have been 2 teams that have been on the road for all 4 series that have won a Stanley Cup. The 2025 Florida Panthers. Last season, it was a team that everyone said they just need to get in. Well, that's the truth. They just needed to get in. And once they got in, they started every playoff series on the road, and yet they find a way to win the Stanley Cup. And the LA Kings team I'm familiar with, because I was on the Arizona Coyotes coaching staff in 2012, and we faced off against the Kings in the Western Conference Final, and we had home ice in Arizona. And that LA King was rolling. Man, they were rolling. They were a beast from the West. They were physical. They were dominating. They played like teams do now. They smothered you. And like the Florida Panthers do now. But those are the only two teams since 2000 that have had to start every single playoff series on the road. And they were still able to win the cup. But it does show how important that home ice advantage is as these teams start to prepare for the next stretch of games. We're through a quarter of the season. We've got 3 quarters to go. These teams need to find a way to get wins to try to find themselves some home ice advantage by the time the playoffs roll around, because they are important. And we look through these teams and they have a ways to go to get to a home ice advantage. But you look at some of the coaching differences and have they made a difference? Boston's got a new coach. They're having a great start of their season. Pittsburgh's new coach. They're in a playoff spot. But what does the difference of a coach do to individual players? And how much can that make a difference? And do coaches dislike their players? Well, the answer is yes, they do. And I'm going to pull up an example. When you go to the Philadelphia Flyers, and there was a very public falling out between John Tortorella and Cam York, some of the things that led up in that one-on-one battle, as it were part of the reasons that led up to John Tortorella's firing in March of last season. Now those are well publicized on the relationship between Cam York and John Tortorella, but do they make a difference? Well, when you go back to what Cam York was doing a season ago, he had played 58 of the first 74 games. So he'd sat out some games. He had missed he missed 16 games up to that point. He had 4 goals, 11 assists, 15 points through 58 games. 4, 11, 15. This year, he's 1, 9, 10. He's got 10 points through 15 games. Last year, he finished the season with 15 points. He leads the Philadelphia Flyers defense in points right now. He's 2 points over Jamie Drysdale. He's got 6 points on the power play. Last year, 0 points on the power play. Why? Because he wasn't playing the power play. And you look at the other stat. He was getting 21 minutes of ice time under John Tortorella. This is to the point where John Tortorella left. This is when John Tortorella was relieved of his duties. Cam York was getting 21 minutes of ice time. This season, Cam York is getting 24 and a half minutes, 3.5 minutes more than he did a year ago. Does it make a difference? Do you think he's playing better because a coach likes him more? Well, yeah. I mean, part of it is if a coach doesn't like you, it's difficult. And I've been in the room where coaches don't like players. And it's surprising. I'm not going to get into who the players and coaches were because I don't think that's fair and I don't think this is the right forum and I know everybody wants to hear that. But every coach I've worked for has players that they do not like. Now, and I don't mean they don't like them away from the ice, that they're not their friends. Sometimes that's the case, but that's from behavior away from the ice, and those things are... They may be inconsequential because you can not like a player as a person off the ice, but it's how you like them as a player on the ice. I don't like the guy, but he's really good. He plays within our system. He does things right. I'm going to put him on the ice. You can have a jerk that's a good hockey player, and you have to put him into those minutes, even if you don't like him as a person. But when you don't like him as a hockey player, meaning you don't like the way he plays, he doesn't fit into your system, I just don't like that guy. And it gets to a point where you can't see that player do anything right. And I'm not kidding. When you're watching video with a coach that has a player that he dislikes, he literally cannot do anything right. Puck bounces over a stick. It's that player's fault. It's a bad line change. It's a bad play. It's a bad place. Even if that player has nothing to do with it, somehow the blame falls on that player. And that 100% happens. The funny thing is, in the early 2000s, prior to the salary cap, you would see players traded. And if you didn't like a player or a management wanted to shake it up, you'd see that player gone. You can't do that now. You can't, in this salary cap year, you can't just go, I don't like this guy, I'm going to trade him. What happens to those guys that aren't liked is they don't get the ice time. They don't get the line matchups, meaning they're not going to play with the best players. It might be a second line winger, but guess what? He's going to be a fourth line winger. I don't like him. I don't like him. We're going to push him farther down the lineup. And it would get so bad that you could sit on the front of the bus, and as that player would walk onto the bus, you would hear the coach mutter things under his breath about that player. and the player had no chance. Because you can't dig yourself out of that hole. It is so hard to dig yourself out of that hole. And you see it around the league when players are performing. Leo Carlson is performing so much better under John Quenneville. Why? Well, last season, you look at the coaching staff, those younger players didn't excel because they weren't getting as much ice time as they are now. So yes, it makes a difference. And yes, it sets an attitude. And we talk about culture. It's not culture. It's just, guy likes me. My boss likes me. I'm going to perform better in my job. I am. I get that constant praise, and I know he likes me, and I'm going to perform better. If he doesn't like me, man, I can't do anything right. So I think you're seeing some of these personal best. We talked about Pasternak doing better. We talked about York doing better. Leo Carlson doing better. The coaching shift has helped those players, and has helped them perform better because of an atmosphere that coach can create. And I think that's where the shift in coaches are going. I've said this before, that I don't know if the hardline coach can succeed in the National Hockey League anymore. I just think there has to be a mix of a coach that can set up accountability within his group, that sets a good system play with X's and O's, but it can also pat his players on the back. I think you need to have that element in your coaching right now. I think if you do not, your days are numbered in the league, and I don't know if there's many of those guys left in the league. I think 15 years ago, I think the majority of the coaches in the league coached like that. But the shift has come. And I don't think you can coach like anymore. And I think you can see when players, the best players, have the freedom to play and are in an environment that encourages that creativity offensively. I think they're happier, and I think you're seeing that around the league as part of the reasons why some of these teams are starting to perform better. Well, I always have to go to Utah and the Utah Mammoth for the Mammoth Minute. And I know it's not a minute, but I'm going to call it the Mammoth Minute just because it's catchy. And so this is going to be the Mammoth Minute on what's going on with the Utah Mammoth. Well, right now the Utah Mammoth are struggling. This is a team that a week ago was towards the top of the standings. And if you look at the first 10 games of the season, the Utah Mammoth started off 8-2. They had 16 points, and they were the first place team in the Western Conference through 10 games. They're scoring at a torrid pace of 3.7 goals per game, 6. Better than that, they were keeping the puck out of the net. Their goals against was 2.4. They were third in the National Hockey League. That's through the first 10. Over the last 8, they find themselves 2-5-1, earning just 5 points, putting them 31st in the NHL during that span. From going from 6th in goals for per game, now they're 27th in goals for per game, getting just 2.63 goals, more than a goal fewer over the last 8. And a bigger problem still is your ability to keep that puck out of the net. They went from 3rd in goals against over the first 10 to 30th over the last 8, allowing 3.88, almost 4 goals per game over their last 8. The power play went from 14th to last. Over the last 8 games, they have a power play of 4.8%, putting them last in the National Hockey League in that span. The bright spot and the good news, they're first. They have not given up a goal while shorthanded. They've killed 16 straight penalties over the last game, and it's one of the bright spots for this Utah Mammoth team. So what's happening? Well, this team's not scoring. There's a team having a difficult time scoring, and you can go to the power play. The power play has been one of the biggest problems. They have 1 power play goal in their last 8 games. This is a team that was buzzing the puck around, and their power play was incredibly successful with Gunther and Keller and Schmaltz all putting up numbers on the power play, and that's not happening right now. The power play needs to score. Once the power play starts to score, this is a team that will start to have more success, and you're going to see them again hovering around that playoff line in the Western Conference. But this team's got to stop the puck. One of the things that we were surprised at over the first 10 games is how well this older defensive core with defensemen like Ian Cole, the defense like Nate Schmidt, that had Oli Mata, that had older defensemen on the back end, and they were limiting shots to their opponents, which they're still doing. They've outshot their opponents in their last 6 games. But they're not getting those wins. Why? Because they're giving up more goals. They've given up 3 or more goals in 6 of their last 8 games. And again, we talk about 3 being the benchmark. That's the benchmark. 3+ in 6 of 8, and they have had 2 or fewer goals in 5 of 7. It's not a good recipe. Utah has to start being able to put the puck in the net. Logan Cooley has to start there. He's got no goals in his last 7 games. Keller has stayed on pace. He's got 3 goals, 3 assists to his last 6. And he's continuing to put this team on his shoulders offensively. And I think you're going to see him starting to creep away with the lead of this Utah team offensively. And again, we talk about experience. And I know Gunther and Cooley are guys that are coming up on this team. And I believe that is your dangerous tandem as this team continues to get through the rebuild. And they're out of the rebuild, let's face it. Out of the rebuild and vying for a playoff spot, they're going to get that youth. But Clayton Keller is the guy that led this team in scoring a year ago. He set franchise records there and in Arizona. He's going to lead this team offensively. He's going to be a guy that we're going to talk about on the Olympic team. He's going to have to get them out of this funk. This is going to have to come on the backs of Clayton Keller. So look for Clayton Keller to get on the scoreboard for this Utah Mammoth and help pull them out of where they're at. And it's also Vejmelka. And I know all the broccoli heads in Utah, and he started off in his first 7 starts. 5 of those 7, he had a save percentage above 900. And since October 25th, 5 of his 6 starts, he has a save percentage less than 900. And you don't want to rely heavily on your goaltender. It can't be the goaltender. It can't be all about your goaltender because that's not consistently able to sustain that over time either. You can't have your goaltender from game 1 through game 82 save your bacon every game and be the guy. Like, they got to score more goals. But Vejmelka needs to get back to the consistency. We talked about his ability to be consistent through a regular season. Well, that's showing now. He needs to get back on track, and he needs to put several games together and putting that save percentage back over 900. It's going to be important for Utah to get back on track, that they're going to have to get to a spot where they're giving up less than 3 goals per game. Now, they're heading out to Anaheim and San Jose back-to-back. And Anaheim's a tough team. This is the benchmark of where this team fits in with today's NHL. Where do they play with this fast-paced Anaheim Duck team? It's a high-event team. They're going to give up chances, and they're going to get chances. Where does Utah fit against Anaheim? And you're going to see that tonight. But it's a back-to-back against San Jose, and San Jose is a team that's starting to get back to earth in the standings, but it's still a team that's offensively gifted and can play with pace and play with speed. It's a team that can put up goals. So the next 2 nights, they've got to play teams that can score goals. How are they going to compete before they finally get to have an extended stretch at home? They haven't played an extended stretch at home since October 21st. And that's not going to come till November 20th, where they're going to get more than 1 consecutive game at home. This team is very good at home. You're looking at teams Vegas, New York, Vegas, Montreal. 4 very good teams coming in to the Delta Center. How can they compete at home? Can they continue to use that energy from the Delta Center to put up home wins? Because if they can, and they can get points at home, this team's a playoff team. I said that before. If they can continue to keep their winning streak and they're getting points at home into the Delta Center, this team can make the playoffs. So over the next 6 games, you're looking at a team that has to compete against high-scoring offensive teams on the road and then come home to play teams. New York Rangers are the best team on the road right now. Best team on the road in the National Hockey League. How do they fare in that area? Over the next 6 games, that is going to kind of give you an idea of where they are, because that's American Thanksgiving. Over the end of that 6-game stretch, that's American Thanksgiving. Can this Utah team get themselves into a playoff spot by American Thanksgiving? And this is going to be a key benchmark for this team. It's better than they were a season ago. This is a team that is improving on the standings that they were a season ago. And where were they a season ago? They had 17 points. They were 7-8-3 through 18. But the biggest stat for me was they were minus 13 in goal differential a season ago. Minus 13 in goal differential. This year, they're a plus 3. And one of the other benchmarks besides the American Thanksgiving for a playoff team is where teams are in plus minus. Traditionally, if you're plus, and we did that study, we're going to do that again as the playoffs get closer and closer. Teams that are positive goal differential have a much better chance of making those a playoff spot than teams that are negative in goal differential. When you go to the Western Conference right now, there's only 1 team in a playoff spot with a negative goal differential, and the Seattle Kraken are a -1. There's only 1 team outside of the playoffs in the Western Conference right now with a positive goal differential, and that is the Utah Mammoth. So the Utah Mammoth right now have 21 points. Seattle has 23. They've had even number of games, but over time, if the math continues that way and Seattle continues to have a negative goal differential and Utah continues to have a positive, it is much more likely that Utah will make a playoff spot and a playoff rush. and a playoff push with that positive goal differential. Now, I do want to mention before I get off the goal differential, I just want to talk about where the goal differential lies right now in the Eastern Conference and how important the goal differential is in plus minus. Well, right now, there are 4 teams with a negative goal differential in the Eastern Conference playoff spot right now. It's Detroit, Montreal, they're both -2. New York Islanders and the Ottawa Senators are both -1. There are 2 teams that are positive goal differential that are out. The New York Rangers are a +2, and that's all because of their road record of 9-1-1, not their 1-7-1 home record. It's amazing they have a positive goal differential after being shut out 5 times already this season. And the Washington Capitals are a +3. So those are 2 teams to keep your eye on that are outside right now looking in. The Utah Mammoth going to have to get back on track, and it's going to start in the next 6 games. It's going to be their ability to win at home, and can Clayton Keller pull this team through with his leadership, and can Karel Vejmelka get back on track? Well, we bounced around a lot today. I think the big takeaways are teams that are in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving. Keep your eye on your favorite team as the playoffs get closer to Thanksgiving date. How is your team in a playoff spot? Or are they just out of a playoff spot by American Thanksgiving? And I tell you, the Boston Bruins can find themselves in a playoff spot in just 10 days. Absolutely amazing to me how well this team has played, and with the new coach and with David Pastrnak. So keep an eye on your team as they approach Thanksgiving. Keep your eye on if your favorite player is getting more ice time than a year ago, and if he's putting up better numbers. And more importantly, he's got a smile on his face as he's jumping over the boards. That's your key indicator that he's in a good place as this season progresses. And keep an eye on that Utah Mammoth just outside the playoffs at American Thanksgiving. Can they find themselves above the double line in the next 6 games? Thanks for joining me today on this rambling edition of Inside the Coach's Room. Kind of all over the place, but I'll see you next Monday. So make sure you subscribe to Inside the Coach's Room. And as always, I'm Petey, and we'll see you at the rink.